So unless you're living under a rock or don't read the BLUELOCK manga, Ubers vs Bastard Minen is the game currently going on in the NEL Egoist League arc. The game almost being done with a tied score of 2-2 and also a week break, I thought it'd be a good time to put out a video like this, discussing the NEL games but more of the Ubers game since we're currently on it. I want to compare the games to one another very briefly and then talk about the Ubers game itself, like what they've done good, what they've done bad, and future expectations for it, and also answering the question, is Ubers vs Bastard Minen the worst game in the NEL? Before everyone gets their pitchforks and starts setting fires in the comments section, this is just a discussion video, not me flat out saying that any of the games are trash or are bad, or me specifically saying the Ubers game is the worst. We're just going to be answering that question, and I honestly thought of this video because I saw a comment on a website I read BLUELOCK on saying that the Ubers game is the most boring match we've seen so far. So I thought this was interesting and wanted to make a video on it since we are on break, and I asked for y'all's opinions on it too as well with that poll. No hate to BLUELOCK or anything, I mean my whole channel is literally me talking about it and loving it, and I don't want to come off as some typical angry guy on social media saying this needs to be made this way or that should have been done like this. Nah, I trust the author and his plans, and there's a reason why he's an author and I'm not. Again, this video is pretty much gonna compare the games real quick, talk about the Ubers game, and then at the end, decide which one I personally think is the worst out of the three, so stick around till then. I say it in every video, but thank you guys so much for supporting. I appreciate y'all so much, even if you're just a lurker or just viewing or whatever. I appreciate y'all too. That being said though, please do hit the subscribe button as it helps me out a bunch, but let's hop straight into the video. Alright, so we all know it. Barcha, Munchen, and Ubers are the games that have been played or currently playing. Right off the bat, it's kind of obvious that some games are going to be above others just due to the nature of it. Each game has their strengths. Barcha was just a straight introduction to the NEL, so we're not going to get a super intense match, but more of a build-up as to what comes next. Munchen, we got that introduction already, so it can focus more on the hype plays, the rivalries, and other stuff. The Ubers game is more of a development game for everyone. We see that especially for Barou in the most recent chapter and other characters we haven't seen like Rightful. So I'm not going to go into detail recapping the whole series and all of the NEL. This video would literally be like 30 hours long, but in general, that's just a very, very broad synopsis of the games. It's very hard to compare them because they're all very different. It's like comparing pants and shirts. They're both completely different, but they're both completely needed. I somehow always come up with the worst analogies possible. But anyways, I asked y'all on the YouTube poll, and we got around 3,000 votes about what your least favorite NEL game is. Thank you guys so much for voting if you did, and if you haven't already, you should definitely go vote. Good way to interact with me, and I'm always cooking up some good questions. But the results to that poll was super one-sided. Barcha got completely steamrolled with Ubers and Munchen only having a 1% difference. It's not too surprising to me, but it does make sense. Not much happened in the Barcha game, and the Munchen game had everything you wanted from a BLUELOCK game, whereas Ubers is just in the middle of both of them. Alright, let's get into the meat and potatoes though, the Ubers game, since it's the one we're currently on. Heading into the game, we had 5 chapters hyping it up, or just character development / training chapters, which is actually a lot considering that Munchen City only had like 2 chapters and started like right after the Barcha game. In those 5 chapters though, we had a ton of hype building up for the Ubers game, like Barou's 100 milli reveal, Kunigami and Isagi's training, and Hiyori's backstory. And the start of the game does live up to that hype in my opinion. Raichi coming in, all the previous development that we got, and the biggest reveal, Don Lorenzo, another new Gen 11 player. The introduction of a new Gen 11 player is always hype. Like we got Kaiser and Sai, and they are some of the coolest characters in the series. I can't wait to see what Lorenzo has in store. He's gonna be absolutely great and absolutely live up to their level. We move more into the middle of the match with some really cool highlights. Isagi scoring his first NEL goal, Nico and Aiku using Metavision, Barou scoring with Predator's Eye, and that breathtaking Kaiser goal, which people stopped talking about after that week. We do get some other developments as well, like the Egoist 4 training, Goat Gamaru's awakening, and of course the reveal of the last Master Striker, Mark Snuffy. I think this is the one thing the match did really well. Snuffy is just a really cool character with a cool philosophy and a cool playstyle. He has a plan for people's plans. He's playing chess while people are playing checkers. Not even that. He's playing 4D chess in space. Anyways, with all these good things I'm talking about, why are people saying this game is boring or they wanted to move on, especially because Munchen was longer? I think there are a couple things which make people say it's boring, with the most obvious one being the lack of stakes in this game. In all the NEL games so far, I feel like we got a pretty good amount of stakes, or just rivalries. Like the Barcha game was just development to see what it was like, but at the same time, they were also fighting for a starting spot. Munchen had the rivalry between Nagi, Chigiri, Kaiser, and even all that stuff with Yukimiya. But in the Ubers game, it's kind of just Barou and Isagi, which isn't as hype as some rivalries like Rin and Isagi. I think more people want to see the MC get their get back rather than side characters get their revenge. if that makes sense. The revelation of him learning metavision as well in the Munchen game was pretty hype, and I think that's the difference between those games and this game. It's more of what can Isagi learn after this game, rather than what he can learn in the game. By default, that just makes the game a little less interesting and a little more boring, because it's obviously building up for Isagi's inevitable meetup with Rin, Shido, and just Bastard versus PXG. That's why I say it's more about what Isagi learns after the game rather than in the game. Like, what can he do better to improve, or realizing some of his weaknesses for the PXG match, and it's the reason why people say Bastard is gonna lose to Ubers, so he get more development. The next point is the lack of development for certain things. This is a pretty universal problem for NEL, and just in general, it's just a universal problem. I understand that it's a football anime and you can't go in depth with everything and everyone, but some things just never get the development they need. The reason why I bring it up here is because I think Uber so far has the biggest problem with this. I mean, we see it with Isagi and the first goal of the game, where he just literally has a lefty direct out of nowhere. Lefty direct kind of felt like Isagi just did some mining off camera, started with a stone pick, and came back with a full house of diamonds. Obviously not to that extent. It was kind of explained by the Egoist 4 training, but we never actually see him training specifically for lefty direct or how he'll use it in certain situations, or just anything in general. I understand that you don't want to put another game inside of another game, but they could have just put the game before in those like 5 chapters instead of Ness just being a simp, and it would have been more believable than just what seems to be Isagi pulling something out of thin air. Maybe it was just a part of the surprise factor, but I don't know. It's not just that, though. They did my boy Lorenzo dirty, in my opinion. I think a lot of people can agree, but Lorenzo so far has really only just worked at the start of the match with the zombie dribbling, and that's about it. I understand he's not going to be the star of the show like Sai or Kaiser, who are playing more aggressive positions, and that he's taking the ball up far, which is crazy for a center back. But we're talking new Gen 11 level here, where we got Sai literally soloing teams without breaking a sweat, Kaiser with Kaiser impact. I don't know, Lorenzo just doesn't seem to have anything that helps him stick out, which sucks because he's such a cool character. I mean, zombie dribbling is cool, but we never got any real highlight for it compared to Sai's dribbling and passes or Kaiser impact. Again, I'm not here just to hate. I loved his backstory, the way he looks at things, and just in general his character, and that's what I'm saying. As a character, I think he's really cool, but as a player, I feel like they should have gave him more. There are some other things they could have developed, like Hiyori got his backstory 20 chapters ago and still hasn't played. Kunigami hasn't done literally anything, or just side characters in general haven't done anything. They just have a lot of unanswered questions, and I feel like the NEL would have been a perfect time to develop some characters from the second selection, especially the Ubers game since it is a development game. I'm not gonna lie, nobody knows or cares about Picasso, Rico, or Abdi. Just these random fodder characters with no development or no past scenes. Instead, they could have put players we've seen from literally chapter 1 or episode 1, like the guy with the paper-like hair instead of Picasso in the Barcha game. It's just giving some people the Corona treatment, or at least it feels like some people had a fighting chance at getting a salary, instead of making it blatantly obvious that some of them aren't making it. So it kind of sucks because the lack of development we do get, but the development we do get is actually really, really good. I've said it before, but Snuffy's character was developed really, really well. From his backstory to his skills and philosophy, not even joking, I think Snuffy's the most developed master striker, and his game hasn't even finished yet. Barou's development as well in the Ubers game was just absolutely perfect and in line with his character. It's what we wanted to see from Barou. Lastly, they gave our boy Raichi some development with him being the dual master, and that's the development I'm talking about for these characters we haven't really seen. Let them do something that puts them up for debate for being a good character. It just sucks because if they were able to pull that off for multiple characters, it would feel like the game has more stakes or more importance because there's characters fighting for spotlight and stuff. There are some more problems that I don't think I'll talk about in this video, but to touch on it briefly, this game is kind of just rinse and repeat. Like, Barou gets the ball, Isagi blocks it, same thing happens over and over again. And compare that to Munchen, where different people are creating different chemical reactions. You can see why people like Munchen over these other games like Barcha or Uber. Now, what do I want to see moving forward, or what do I think will happen in the rest of the game? I think I'll be absolutely wrong about the development in the coming chapters. The ending of the games always play out super well in my opinion. They got a lot of unanswered questions that they can answer to make the game super interesting, like what are they going to do with Hiyori, how will they develop Kunigami, stuff like that, and I think if they do that, this game will be one of the best. So that's my opinion. Again, I'm not hating or anything, but just giving my opinions on the flaws of the NEL, but I do think they will get fixed. So with all that being said though, is Ubers versus Bastard Munin the worst game in the NEL? Nah, I don't think anyone believed that title. It was just a question and I'm giving my answer to it. No, it isn't. I do agree it's kind of just a rinse and repeat, which makes a game a little bit boring, especially with how many breaks we're getting. But I think they have a lot of potential for the end of the game and the questions they can answer. I feel like it isn't too accurate because the Ubers game hasn't finished and PXG hasn't even played. but I guess my pick for in general is gonna be Barcha. Pretty obvious one. I think it just lacks stakes and hype in my opinion compared to all the other games. And not to say it is a bad game. I mean, it's still really good, which is saying something because the worst game is still really good. But I had to give my answer and there it is. And even though I didn't go too in depth with that game specifically, since we are on the Ubers game, I still think it is the worst. We are on break, so I thought I'd just put out this discussion video. So it's a little rushed and missing some details. I've had to re-record this video like 3 times and cut out a lot of the things I wanted to say. Let me know what you guys think of the Ubers game so far, if you think it's good or bad, if you agree with me or disagree with me. My name's Hiryo. Thank you guys for watching as always. Have a good day and I'll see you guys in the next one.